Looking good, feeling good, and making a world of difference, one bottle at a time. Care for your hair and the planet with Elvive from L'Oréal Paris. All our shampoo and conditioner bottles are now made from 100% recycled and recyclable plastic, except the caps, which we're still working on. Together, we can save 5,000 tons of virgin plastic a year. For more information, see l'oreal-paris.co.uk/Elvive Recycle.
Already have a podcast? It's time to join Spreaker's monetization program, the easiest way to profit from your passion starting on day one. You decide which episodes and exactly where you want the ads to be inserted, and Spreaker takes care of the rest. If you're not on Spreaker, it's easy to import your podcast in just a few clicks, and then you can monetize your older episodes too. For one free month on a pro account, visit Spreaker.com/monetize. That's SPREAKER.com/monetize to join and start making money today.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Paranormal Concept Show. I'm your host Paul Rook and we are exclusive to the PA UK network. As always, we are joined in the studio by Kerry Greenway and Richard Clements. Hi guys.
Hello.
Hello, how are you?
Oh, not too bad. How are you?
Yeah, really well, really well. Things starting to brighten up a little bit. You know, a bit of bad weather over the last couple of days, but it's been all right today.
Where have you been on your adventure?
Already have a podcast? It's time to join Spreaker's monetization program, the easiest way to profit from your passion starting on day one. You decide which episodes and exactly where you want the ads to be inserted, and Spreaker takes care of the rest. If you're not on Spreaker, it's easy to import your podcast in just a few clicks, and then you can monetize your older episodes too. For one free month on a pro account, visit Spreaker.com/monetize. That's SPREAKER.com/monetize to join and start making money today.
Just this week.
Me, I went over a couple of weeks ago. I haven't been anywhere much this week, but I visited some Martello Towers, which I've got an upcoming blog coming out on. I visited the Clacton Beach defence line, stretching from Jaywick into Clacton. So keep an eye out for those.
Oh, Kerry knows exactly where Clacton is.
Oh, yes, it's up.
Yeah. Speaking of blogs, though, if you know, we do write blogs, so if you want to check them out, they are on our website at paranormalconcept.com/blogs.
Yes, they are.
Yeah. There you go.
There's lots of blogs there. Keep everyone entertained.
Lots of blogs to all different types of topics as well.
Yeah. All fascinating, especially my ones.
I know. No, sorry, mine are
my
best.
ones.
Mine are best.
Well, you've got one out today, haven't you?
I have, yeah. It's summer solstice, right? So I've written one on summer solstice and ideas of things you can do. But anyway, we have got a fascinating show ahead for you this week. We're actually going mudlarking. We're actually going to get our knees and our feet and our legs and our hands dirty.
I think, as Richard's her biggest fan, I think Richard should introduce her.
I do too. Go on, Rich.
Oh dear, here we go. Oh dear, you really sprung that on me. Yes, someone I follow on YouTube a lot, and as having an interest in metal detecting, this is not 100 miles away from my sort of main interest. It's Nicola White. Hello, Nicola.
Hi, hello. Pleased to meet you all.
And you.
No, Richard has been a big fan, and he actually brought this
topic
to the table.
Starstruck.
Yeah, actually brought this. He brought this topic to the table because it's actually quite. Although this is a paranormal radio station, it's amazing how that ties into history so much. And watching Nicola's videos, she goes out mudlarking and she's finding a lot of artefacts that are literally just laying there, aren't they, Nicola?
They are. When the tide goes out, it leaves all sorts of little fragments of the past on the mud for you to find, things that used to belong to people a very long time ago that have been lost or forgotten. And so, yes, I do. I go out and search for these pieces of history that the tide leaves out.
Now, one thing that you seem to find, and this is one thing that's bugging me about the whole thing, really, to be fair, you find a lot of pipes.
I do. Clay pipes.
Why? Why are there so many pipes in the mud?
Well, clay pipes, they've been smoked in England since the late 16th century when tobacco was first introduced, and used to be smoked by women, men and children. And what we're finding now are the remainders of these clay pipes, and they really are a little bit like old-fashioned cigarette butts. They weren't meant to last. They were smoked once or twice and then they were thrown away, they were disposed of, and so there are literally thousands and thousands of these left over now in the mud for us to find.
See, I told you, Kerry. You wouldn't believe me, would you?
I couldn't believe that many people smoked, quite frankly. I mean, I just sort of had it down to old men in armchairs going on their long stemmed pipes, a bit like Frodo or something going on in the background. But that fact alone is fascinating piece of history that you can just find. Very surface mud as well, this is, isn't it? You're not digging deep for these artefacts.
No, that's right. I mean, there is erosion going on along the Thames foreshore. The clipper boats come along, so they're washing off the layers. But these pipes, like I said, they date back to, I think the earliest pipe that I've got dates back to about 1580, and then they go right up to the early 20th century, and some of them really are like little artworks. It's surprising for us to imagine that people used to throw them away, because they really are so special. And I think what's special about finding a pipe is that often when I pick up a pipe that's been in the mud, the last person who touched it is the person who smoked it, sometimes 200 or 300 years ago, and that's quite special. It's a very personal piece of history.
And they've got quite a lot of markings on them as well, aren't they? They're not just boring bits of pipe. And I mean, sometimes you only find the stem bit. Sometimes you just find the bowl. But now and again you come across a whole one, don't you? It's amazing to me that survives that long under those conditions.
I know, it's incredible. A lot of it is to do with the Thames mud, which is really like a nice big cushiony muddy quilt which surrounds it, and keeps it really safe for all those years.
So the other thing with this, it's quite dangerous then, this mud sludge, isn't it? Because I know off Canvey, where I live, you have to be very careful because it can be a bit like quicksand, can't it?
Yeah, you have to be careful. The Thames foreshore can be quite a hazardous place, and before you go down mudlarking, there are various things to take into consideration. It's advisable to go in pairs. You need to make sure when the tides are going to be coming in or going out. You don't want to get cut off, and the mud can be very deep and dangerous, and so you want to take your phone, and you have to be careful. It can also be very grubby and muddy, messy down there. I mean, a lot of people wear gloves, so yes, it's fraught with perils. I suppose it makes it even more exciting.
So how much sort of time period do you actually have on the mud from the low tide for the tide to actually turn and start coming back in? Are you on there is it quite a short period of time, or is it up to a couple of 3 hours or so?
I tend to go down and chase the tide out, so I like to get down to the river about 2 hours before low tide so that I can have a good time sort of chasing it out. And then once the tide is out, you've got another couple of hours really before it starts to come back in, and then you run out of time. So I'm usually down there for about 4 hours, I suppose.
The Thames is one of the most treacherous rivers, I'm told, because the tides come in, they come in hard and fast. Is this just certain areas of the Thames, or is it generally all the way through?
It's all the way through. I mean, the Thames has got a tidal reach of about 7 meters, I think. So, you have to watch what you're doing. Sometimes it's very easy to become so absorbed with what you're looking for and searching, because when you're mudlarking, you're very much in the moment. And so you have to make sure that where you are, you know where your exit points are, because it can be easy to get cut off. So it's never happened to me yet, thankfully. But I always make sure I know how to get back off the foreshore. And sometimes that involves climbing up a steep ladder, which I'm not too keen on. But yes, the tide is very, very important to keep your eye on the tide, because it doesn't wait around for anyone.
It's interesting to note that with mudlarking, especially around central London, there's a few protocols you need to follow. I understand it's licensed, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. To mudlark along the River Thames, you need a permit, which is issued by the Port of London Authority, and that gives you the right to scrape down 7.5 centimetres. You also have to report your finds if you find anything that's over 300 years old, or if it's of significant historical importance, or if it's treasure. You have to take that along to the Museum of London and they'll register it on their database. But yes, you have to have a permit to search in any way, shape or form on the tidal Thames.
So when you talk about treasure, once you've registered it, do you then keep it?
Well, treasure, which means really gold or something, let's say Tudor gold, that I've not ever actually found any treasure. I know there's quite a long process involved with registering it. They have to get the coroner involved as well. And I think on some occasions you can have it back, but it's also possible, if it's very special, that the Museum of London might want to keep it.
That's not really fun, is it?
Dear
Takes the
Kerry.
fun out of it. I was thinking I'll go down there and find a gold ring or something. So,
Thank you, your ideas, Kerry.
King Henry VIII's ring or something. That would be awesome.
It would.
So, other than pipes, you find a lot of other kinds of artefacts. What sort of other things do you find?
Well, gosh, there's so many different things you can find. There's coins, obviously. There's, let's say, medals. There's pieces of jewellery, old luggage tags, padlocks, bottles, pottery, buttons, lots of buttons, all sorts of things, really. The things that everyday people over the years, over the centuries have lost or thrown away. There's just such a wide variety of objects.
Because actually finding the objects is sort of part of it, but I sort of am quite interested on how you go about researching some of the objects. I've sort of watched a few of your YouTube when you go back to your art studio, and you sort of got books on nothing but clay pipe bowls and things like that.
I think that's part of the joy of it, is really finding out about the object that you've got. It's really motivating to do the researching when you found something. It's totally different than if you were in a classroom learning about something. I think the very fact that you found it, you want to find out more about it and learn where this object came from and who might have owned it, because you can just get such a glimpse into the lives of people in the past who might have owned or lost these objects.
Have you ever found an artefact you have been able to trace back to a particular person?
I'm trying to think. Well, I found one in particular I would have liked to have traced back to a particular person, but which I haven't, is a jawbone. Although, of course, when you find human remains, you do have to tell the police, and then they take it for forensic testing. But this one I found not very far from where the Woolwich prison hulks were moored back in the 19th century. And I always wondered whether it could have been from a prisoner from one of these hulks. When it was dated, when it was forensically analysed, it came back as being from somebody who died after the 17th century, but before the 20th century. So it was all very vague. But you never know. It could have belonged to somebody who used to be a prisoner on a prison hulk.
That's certainly interesting. You do the Thames mainly, but you also cross over to Kent and do the Medway, I've noticed.
Yes.
a few times. And do you have a particular sort of favourite sort of between the Thames and the Medway? And there was something else I was wondering. Is there a difference of finds from the Medway or the Thames, or is what you're finding sort of roughly the sort of same?
No, I mean, the Thames is more rich in finds, really, because it's running right through the city, you know, it's running right through London, and it's always been so busy. There's so much going on, so much activity, so many people living along its banks that you're going to find more objects in London. Whereas the Medway, it's not quite the same. There are areas where you're going to find more things than other places. I mean, I particularly do love the area around Hoo. Sort of my favourite places.
Yeah, because you have actually visited Hoo Fort, haven't you?
I have, yes, several times. Probably shouldn't have really, but I do love it over there. It's just such a beautiful place.
I tried to talk Kerry into going over there, but once I told her you need an inflatable boat, she was no.
Yeah, not my kettle of fish, really, to be fair.
Well, there's so much history in the Medway, you know, and those two islands, Hoo and Darnet, with those Napoleonic forts there, and they were manned by so many different people over the years. I mean, it never actually saw any real action, but there was always a military presence on those islands up until, you know, just before the Second World War, I think. So, you know, you do get a lot of military history out there.
Oh, right.
Is there anywhere specific you go? So, for example, if you wanted to go and look for the clay pipes, is there a specific area that you would go to? Or if you wanted to go and find some more coins?
Yes, there are specific areas that I go to for clay pipes. But of course, I'm afraid I can't tell you.
Yeah, I don't blame you, Nicola. Yeah, I don't blame you. You don't want someone poaching on your territory.
Good try.
I know where I can find some.
No, I mean, the thing is, you are going to find clay pipes all the way up and down the river.
Yeah.
It's a question that a lot of people ask. It's a case of really just searching and finding the spots that work for you. You know, lots of mudlarks have different areas that they really love and that are good to them. And I suppose we all have those areas that we return to time and time again.
I have to say, sorry, Richard, but I have to say, when you're out on the mud, to me, when I've been watching your videos, you go, oh look, can you see it? Can you see it? I'm thinking, no. All I can see are stones. How do you spot things in amongst all of the, you know, the little pools of water and the mud and the stones that are there?
Well, there's a saying in the mudlarking world, which is that you get your eye in. You know, you just get used to what you're looking for. You sort of, your eye will just catch a shape, a familiar shape that you've become accustomed to. I'm pretty good at spotting clay pipes because I know exactly what I'm looking for. It really is a case of practice, really, and just being in the zone and just focusing. That's what it is.
When I was a kid, I used to go to. I grew up in Erith, and there along the river there's like a little bit of a beach, stony beach. And as a kid, I used to go and play there. And the amount of clay pipes you find, sometimes you just find the stems, but there was one particular time I found the bowl as well, which was like a shell.
Oh, lovely
pattern on it. And I took that home because
it's so exciting, finding anything like that, really. It's just it's a thrill. It's like going on a treasure hunt.
Yeah.
What actually got you into this? Because it's not the sort of thing it's muddy, it's dirty, it's like, you know, all weathers.
Hardly very girly, is it, Kerry?
No, it's not particularly girly. So what actually got you into this mudlarking affair?
Well, I think I grew up in Cornwall, and I always used to love going down on the beach and searching for shells and bits of glass and pottery. But when I moved to London, I think in about 1998, I found myself down on the foreshore near Greenwich and started to find bits of pottery. And then one day I found a coin, and I hadn't actually realised that mudlarking was a thing until then. And then I realised that you could find this history down there, and I was really hooked after that, because every time you go down to the river to go mudlarking, you know you're going to find something, but it might just be a button, but it's always something that you'll be able to possibly find out a rich story behind it. So I just became quite hooked with it, really, because it's just, it's fascinating. It really gets your imagination going.
Talking of buttons, you found one recently, haven't you, that's led you down a rabbit hole?
Yes, I did. You're talking about my Woolwich Workhouse button.
Yes, I am. Even I got a little bit excited when you went workhouse. I was like, workhouse, that's more my thing.
Yeah.
So tell me about that. How did that lead you to where you ended up? Because you found that just mudlarking, didn't you?
Yes, I found this button down on the foreshore, again in southeast London, and I started to look it up and found out with the help of people on Twitter, actually. I tend to share my finds quite a lot on social media because I like to engage people. And plus, it's a very good way of getting information about them because there's people on Twitter that know absolutely, like everybody knows everything. I don't think I've ever failed to find out something with the marvellous combined knowledge of people on social media. And so I found out it was from Woolwich Workhouse. And then I started to research that and realised that there's a little bit of the workhouse that still exists up off of Plumstead Common in Woolwich. So I went to investigate and found this wooded area, which is called Workhouse Wood. And it was very atmospheric going in there because it was quite dark and rainy, and that is not the sort of place I'd want to go on my own at night, I can tell you. Went down there, and then there's an information board all about the workhouse, and it was just very special that to find out so much about this place just through finding this one button and to wonder whose button it was. Somebody suggested it could have been perhaps from one of the boys that was sent to work on one of the training ships, and that's very possible if they were moored off of Woolwich. But it could have belonged to a member of staff. I don't know, but I thoroughly enjoyed researching that story.
Oh, that sounds interesting, but you wouldn't go to this place at night, but you leave that to us lot. We'll go there on your behalf.
It did feel very, you do sometimes feel the presence of people around you when you find these things. I just think you can't not really. There's such a lot of history, and especially somewhere like a workhouse, where I imagine there was a lot of misery as well and a lot of sadness that, I think sometimes it's inevitable that there's going to be a bit of a presence around.
Well, I was thinking, you work on the foreshore so much, you're down there when the tide's turning, and those are very, in regards to a spiritual perspective, they're called liminal points, like crossing over that boundary point between elements. And that's supposed to be actually where you're supposed to get the most spiritual activity kind of thing, because it's a dimensional realm change. You're moving in from one area to another. So when you're on the foreshore, this sounds very batshit, but do you get that? Do you get that feeling of presence? I mean, you said that about Woolwich Workhouse, but like when you're on the foreshore, do you feel like there's people with you? And have you witnessed anything strange or weird?
I always feel a presence down there. I mean, I'm a spiritual person anyway, so I'm always looking for little things like that. I do feel a very strong presence down there, and a lot of the things I find. This also probably sounds a bit bonkers. I believe things are found when they're meant to be found. And I think everybody leaves a story behind them, when we leave this world. And so many of them can be found down on the Thames. If I find a name of a pipe maker on a clay pipe, I'll look them up. One of my favourite finds is a brass luggage tag with the name of a soldier who fought in World War One, and I then went on to find his grave in a cemetery not far from where I live. I think that certainly there are stories that are meant to be told and that want to be told, and I always feel a responsibility to try and tell the stories of the people whose objects I find down by the river.
That's brilliant, because you also find a lot of bullets and things like that, don't you?
Yeah, I do. There's a lot of military history down by the river. There's a lot of sad things down by the river. I found a few little things that people have probably thrown in to say goodbye to people. And if it's objects like that, I'll leave them there, or I'll take a photograph and then throw them back in again. There's so many things, and definitely a very big presence of something bigger than you when you're down by the river. I think that's why I just love it there, because it's another world. It's like another world from the London that is going on in the bustling streets.
It can easily get forgotten and overlooked, can't it? All that we've talked about, you just have to walk the streets.
I recently found, which I haven't done a video about yet, and I'm now researching it. It's another really exciting one. I recently found a trader's token from 1657, which was issued by a vintner in Pudding Lane in 1657 called Brian Appleby. So not long before the Great Fire of London. His vintner was, his wine shop or whatever was in Pudding Lane. So I'm currently looking his story up, and that's great because it's a little bit older than some of the things that I usually find.
Wow, that's actually quite amazing, because if that was still there in the Great Fire it's only a few years later, isn't it?
Yeah.
Then that's fueled the fire.
I think, I mean, his shop would definitely have been burned. I mean, he did survive, by all accounts, looking at his what I found out so far, but he would have lost his shop.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
Wow, this is amazing, isn't it? What you can find.
Well, there you
just
go.
A little button, or just like a tradesman mark or something like that. Back into it, dear. Did they used to use? They used the Thames as a rubbish dump, didn't they? Really, they just chucked everything in it.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of people still chuck stuff in it. Unfortunately, it's just that we got plastic now instead of more attractive rubbish. But yes, the Thames was used as a rubbish receptacle since London began. I mean, we find Roman artefacts and all sorts in it. It's just.
That's crazy, isn't it?
There's one part of the Thames foreshore which most people will probably be interested in, but it is very restrictive from what I believe, and that is in front of the Tower of London. And have you ever been fortunate enough to go there?
Oh, I haven't. Actually, we're not allowed to go there. The only people who can go there are the Society of Thames Mudlarks, and they're just a little bit more special than the normal mudlarks like me. Mm-hmm. There's about 50 people in the Society of Mudlarks, and they are allowed to go down there, but we're not. So they have had open days in the past, but I don't think they do them anymore because I think generally of the erosion that they've stopped opening it up to the public once a year. But yeah, I mean, that would be a fascinating place to go. I'd love to go there.
Is that something that you can join, or have you got to be trained up to join them?
You can go on the waiting list, but there's a waiting list. It's one of these societies where there's only a certain amount of members, and literally one has to die before you can go in there. So
I'm sure there's someone out there that could arrange that.
I think there's probably quite a long waiting list. To be honest, the other thing is they're allowed to dig down 1.5 meters, and we're only allowed to go down 7.5 centimeters. But most of the things I find are pretty much on the surface. It gets very messy when you start digging down. You can't see what you're doing anyway.
Yeah, because I notice you do use a metal detector on occasion, don't you? But,
very occasionally I'd be tempted over to the dark side of the metal detector. But I always find, though, that I don't enjoy it as much because I'm so busy trying to hear the beeps and wondering that it's easy to miss what's right in front of your eyes. But it's fun to have a go. I prefer detecting in a field than on the Thames.
Have you do that too, or is that just like you've tried it and?
Yeah, I do occasionally go out field detecting, and I must admit I quite enjoy that because you're not going to find anything by eye really in a field, so it's quite fun. You can just wander around, go in your own little world, and just see what you can find. The last time I went detecting, actually, I found a silver Roman denarius coin. So that was very exciting.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
You're
Yeah.
very lucky, aren't you?
Well, I guess I am. I put in the work, but yeah,
True.
I am very lucky, and I am very lucky. What can I say? It's true.
Oh dear. So, okay, so you aren't just a mudlarker. That's not the only reason we've got Nicola on, because she's also an artist who makes fantastic sculptures, I want to call them. They are sculptures, really, aren't they?
Yeah, I do make little sculptures. Yeah, sculptures and assemblages, and all sorts of things made out of the objects that I pick up out of the river. I particularly make fish out of the glass that I pick up, the old glass, and I use a lot of plastic as well.
Sea glass is actually very spiritual in itself. It's got a whole thing going on in the old spiritual, metaphysical world, sea glass. And you create, and the colours that come out is absolutely astonishing. What's your process with that? Does it evolve before your eyes, or do you set out with a specific idea in mind before you make? How does your process work?
Glass fish?
Yeah, how does your process work with that?
Oh, okay. Well, it's really interesting, the process for my glassfish, because I never know. I have no idea what a fish is going to look like before I start at all. It sounds a bit out there, but whenever I make a glass fish, it's almost like it's made itself. I just start maybe with the head. I've got a lot of glass which I collect, and then I put it all around in my studio. I've got about 4 or 5 tables, and I'll start with a head, for example, and then I just play around with it, really. And then at the end of when it's made, it takes me about 3 hours, I suppose. I look at it and I think, wow, hello. It's like it made itself. It's really quite interesting. I never have a plan. I don't think, oh yes, that's going to go there, that's going to go there. It just comes together, and it's always a source of great joy every time I finish one, because I never know how it's going to be. Yeah, it's very strange.
It's part of that artistic process, though. You hear a lot of, some artists prefer to do like a template, like a pencil drawing, and then they fill in the gaps and stuff like that. And then you've got these other, what are classed as evolutionary kind of artists, who literally just go with the flow, almost in a meditative state, and then see what's created from that. And although you might have your thing is like fish, like you say, everyone's different. You don't plan it. It just evolves itself into its form, with the colours and everything. So, and all the material used is what you found whilst you're mudlarking.
Yeah, that's right. I'm always on the lookout for glass. I'll go to particular areas where I know that there's old Victorian dumping areas, for example, and then I'll search out glass, collect lots and lots of it, and I'm always on the lookout for things that I might possibly be able to use. I also collect a lot of old metal, old anything really. I'm very inspired by things that have had a past use or a past life, and it's just nice to be able to put it back together. And I like people to be able to look at things and for their imagination to go on a journey and ask themselves where that might have been before, and who owned it, and where it used to be in a former life.
So we've talked about some of the artefacts you found, not just the glass, but some of like the bullets and the buttons. Do you incorporate those in your work?
I don't use things that are valuable or some. I tend to keep the artifacts that I find, like the Woolwich Workhouse button or things like that. No, I won't use them in a piece of artwork. I just use pottery, glass, bits of metal, but anything that is something that I've researched, I'm not going to use that in a collage. My idea eventually is to have some kind of little museum here where I here where I live.
Well, I'm sure we can get the paranormal community interested in that.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Objects
like
hold
our
energy.
objects.
Yeah, objects
Yeah.
hold energy, they say. So, you know, there's a big field out there for people wanting to hold these objects and see what they can pick up about the people that
Oh
once
yeah,
owned them.
I can imagine. Yeah, I can imagine. Funny, I've just been working on a video of my favourite finds this afternoon, and one of them is my Millbank prison button, and from a prison guard in the Millbank prison. And I'm thinking, wow, there's got to be some.
Oh,
That button must be able to tell some tales.
Oh gosh, yeah, definitely. So, other than the Thames and the Medway, where else have you been, or would you like to go?
Well, I do occasional nice bottle dumps on occasions. I recently went to Guildford, where the River Wey has been drained because they're building a new bridge, and so I went there with a friend, and we had a wander up and down to see what we could find. And I actually came across an old plaque from a builder from Guildford who was alive in the 1800s, and I'm currently researching him. I go anywhere really where there's a chance that people have lost or dropped something. There you will find me rifling around to find it. I mean, I've been to a very big bottle dump out near Heathrow. I can't remember exactly where it is. And that, again, is quite a special place to be. And it's almost sad because it's just so full of things that used to be treasured by people in their homes. And here they all are, you know, broken and lying around in the mud. You can't help thinking, wow, I wonder if all my things are going to end up in somewhere like this in 70 years' time.
I suppose things like bottle dumps, they are quite well sort of documented, are they? Because they would have been there for quite a few years. So I suppose you can research and locate them quite easily.
Yes. But I wouldn't mind finding somewhere else to go at the moment, because the Thames is still very sludgy at the moment because of the lockdown. You know, there was no boating activity on the river, and so a huge layer of sludge has built up over these weeks where there's been no activity. Yeah. So, you know, it's changed the landscape dramatically at the moment, because it's going to take a long time before that sludge gets washed off.
And it's that video I actually...
Oh dear, Richard.
Oh yeah.
You visited the Great. Am I breaking up?
A little bit. Yeah, you was a little bit. It's because he's got too excited, Nicola. That's what it is, basically. So it's important then for the traffic.
Where was I?
It's important for the traffic on the Thames then to keep that sludge away.
Yes, it is actually. It is, because else the layers of mud just build up. You know, if there's nothing to wash it off, then it's just going to build up a lot of sludge, which is maybe what it was like, you know, in the time of the original mudlarks, which dates back to pre-Victorian times, and it was young kids and old women, old people used to be out wading up to their knees, looking around for things in the mud to sell, to live. And I expect that they had a lot more mud to deal with then, because they didn't have boats speeding up and down the river. Well, they had a lot of boats, but nothing like the clipper boats.
Yeah, because it's the speed, isn't it? And we have some amazingly big boats going up and down the river now. I mean, I suppose most of those, like, berth at Tilbury, don't they? The big ones. Yeah, they must.
Yeah, you see them going up and down. Huge, great things. Huge, great boats.
Yeah, Richard, do you want to try again, love?
Yes, and with the sludge and the mud and everything, the actual video I shared to Paul and Kessel when you visited the Grain Fort, or the one you went up onto Grain Fort at the end, and
well, it keeps cutting off.
It does. No, I know. He's talking about Grain Fort when you went out to Grain Fort with your friend, because that's like quite a way out, isn't it? You can walk out to it and then spend time up there. How long did you get when you was actually at Grain Fort?
I've actually slept the night on Grain Fort. That was kind of fun. But that particular day when we went out there, you get quite a long time out there. You've got a good don't know, 5 hours or so to search around and stay out there. By the time the tide goes out and comes back in, you've got quite a long time.
So when you was there, you actually found a live bullet. What are they safe? Because when you go, I've just found that one's live, that one's not. I was like, oh my God, she's got a bullet that could actually fire in her hand.
Well, I mean, I found a live hand grenade.
Oh my God!
Yeah, and the ordnance squad, I called the police. They came and they verified it, and then the ordnance squad came along and they detonated it and exploded it there and then on the foreshore. They shut the river for about 15 minutes, so that was quite exciting. There's an awful lot of ammunition, and a lot of it is live. And obviously you're supposed to. You're not going to take it all to the police because you'd spend the entire time at the police station. So the best thing to do with it is, with like a 303 round, the smaller bullets, is to throw it into the river. It's a bit of it's an awkward topic to talk about because, you never know. I would think after about 70 years or so in the river, it's highly unlikely to explode, I should think. But, the best thing is just to take it and throw it into the middle of the river.
For those of people who don't know, what's the difference? How do you, for somebody who's got literally no clue over here, is it obvious if it's alive, if it's all right, or if it's been spent?
Well, you just get to learn about that. I mean, bullets aren't my speciality, but I can tell a live one from a non-live one. Usually it's got the little pointy bullet bit on the end, and at the bottom there's the pin, the round piece. If it's indented, it's usually been fired. If it hasn't, it's not. But like I said, I'm not an arms expert by any stretch of imagination, and so it's always best to err on the side of caution and just don't take them, just throw them.
Leave them where they are.
Yeah, that particular day I was with my friend David, who's extremely good with ammunition and bullets. He knows everything there is to know.
I bet he got really excited about going to the fort, didn't he?
Oh yeah, he loves that fort. Yeah, he does. He does. Well, I wasn't going to go up that staircase though.
No, I'm with you on that. When they showed me the video, I was like, I'm not even going to go there. He was like, we've got to go and do this. We've got to go do that. My boyfriend's going to go with you, but me, no. I'll wait at home.
Yeah.
No, it makes my legs go funny. I'm not particularly good with heights at all. So no way, I wasn't going to go up there.
No, I just didn't even realise things like that were out there, that people could just go and clamber all over still, really. It's just a whole new world, all of this, to me, to be fair. Richard, try again, third time.
Right, Grain 4. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Now? Oh, right, yeah. So, so what is the sort of time you get out to Grain 4? And is access to it at every low tide, or are there only certain sort of low tides you can actually get out to it?
No, it's accessible at every low tide. It's accessible at every low tide. The tide goes out a long way there, and it's very shallow. It just goes out for a long way, and you've got, like I said, a good 4 hours or so, 4 or 5 hours to go out there.
Right.
Yeah, you've got a good while. Somebody's left a ladder there, which is tied to the side. So probably some other urban explorers or non-urban explorers.
Right, that's me done. Yeah. Get Daryl on the phone, Kerry.
Okay. So, you Nicola, you said you slept on Grain 4.
Yeah.
So the tide comes in and you're like stranded on this fort?
Yes. Yeah, it was just great fun. I don't know, there's just this adventurer. I just love it. I grew up reading The Famous Five, and I still feel like I would like to be in The Famous Five. And so all these things I just love. It's just so exciting. So we went out there, took loads of food, some wine and some, sleeping bags, and just stayed there. Just got this sense of being out there, cut off from the land, and it was just a real thrill.
No, so this is the difference between me and you. You was a Famous Five. I was a Mallory Towers kind of girl.
Oh, I like the Mallory Towers as well.
Kindred Innie Blyton fans over here.
Yeah. Yeah,
Brilliant.
no, I love that.
Richard?
Actually,
No, you're breaking up. Paul, did you have something to say at that point?
No. I'm just enjoying the conversation as it goes. If anyone wanted to start up doing their own mudlarking, what advice would you give them?
Well, firstly, obviously, you apply for your permit. There are several groups you can join on Facebook, and there's some really nice and very knowledgeable people. And there's the Thames Foreshore Mudlarking Finds Facebook group is very good, and they will always answer people's queries. There's a lot of mudlarks on Instagram as well, if you go on there and do hashtag Instagram. And really just learn from these people. I'd suggest that, really. There's a lot of people on Facebook that have these, mudlarking groups, and you can ask people there.
What's the strangest thing you found?
The strangest thing I found. Oh, well, I found several strange things, obviously, apart from my jawbone. I found some very strange little teeth that I didn't know what they were. Turns out they're throat teeth from a fish, and I didn't know fish had throat teeth at all. I found some turtle bone as well that would have probably been used for a turtle soup back in Georgian times. And I found a little seahorse, which was unfortunately dead. I found about 130 messages in bottles in the River Thames since I started mudlarking as well.
Wicked. Have you opened them and read them?
Yes, I have. Yeah, I've collected quite a few. I leave some of them, because sometimes people say goodbye to people in messages of bottles. So that there's times when you just want to respect that and just leave them. But others I've kept, and I've got some great message in a bottle stories.
Give us one. Tell us one of the message in a bottle stories.
Okay, well, I mean, one of the more fun ones, I suppose, is I found a message in a bottle which was written by a child, and it said, I wish I was a Dino Thunder Power Ranger, the Red Ranger, love from Jack Hodges. And I put it on Twitter, and amazingly, I said, can anyone help Jack Hodges' dream come true? Amazingly, it got retweeted thousands of times, and I was able to trace Jack Hodges' family, incredibly. And so I sent him a Power Ranger outfit. And,
wicked!
Yeah, and then he wrote back and sent me a card with him wearing his new Power Ranger attire. So that was pretty special, because it was like throwing a wish in a river and then getting it back. Every child's kind of dream, really.
I just had visions of him sending back saying, I'm 45 now.
Yeah, and there was also one I found, which was a little sadder. It was a letter from a lady who'd lost her sister unexpectedly. Her sister used to work she was working in the Olympics, the last Olympics, but she died very unexpectedly, and she'd been about to go on a round-the-world trip. So this letter actually had a little bag of her sister's ashes in it, and the woman said, whoever finds this, please, let me know where you found the bottle, and we're hoping that this message in a bottle will set my sister's spirit free, to travel around, So I called her. Well, it was about a year after when I found it. So I contacted the family, and she said, "Where did you find it?" And I said, "Oh, I found it near Greenwich, actually." I kind of wish I'd said something else now, but I found it near Greenwich. And she said, "Oh, that's just so typical of Claire. She didn't really want to leave London after all. She just..."
But again, that's brilliant.
Yeah, I think she hoped it was going to be found on some distant, far-flung island, but wasn't to be.
Did you throw it? I don't suppose did you take that one back and throw it back out there for the fate?
No, I did keep that one, actually, and in retrospect, I suppose maybe if I found it again now, maybe I should have thrown it back in. I suppose it's never too late. I could throw it back in now. But because the lady had said to contact them, I felt like it was okay to keep it. But, thinking about it, I think it would have been nice for me to send it on its way again. So,
well, when the time's right, I'm sure you'll get the calling to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because sometimes they come to stay with you for a while and then they want to move on again, don't they? Artifacts.
Yeah.
I find this with crystals a lot.
Yes, absolutely. No, I agree. And sometimes I have given artifacts to people if they feel a particular affinity to them. If somebody realizes it's something sort of maybe linked to their family, I'll give it to them. I did find actually I found a dog tag that belonged to an old dog, actually, a dog that was alive in World War II called Bonzo, and traced his owner, who's still alive, he's about 95. Various things like that. There's a lot of things that I'll give to people if they feel that it resonates with them.
God, this is amazing. The work you do behind the scenes, off the mud, that's astonishing to me. Because it's not just a case of, you're just taking the artifacts and finding out maybe a little bit of history about a point in history. You're finding human connections, which are so obscure, quite frankly. Like that little lad with the Power Rangers outfit, Wish. The chances of you actually finding that child was like 1 million. It's got to be high odds, on you finding the child. So, but for you to actually make that connection and bring his little wish to fruition, that's astonishing to me. I think that's amazing. That connection that people have to objects. It's like almost like another demonstration of it.
Yeah, it's very special. Something quite special about it. I must admit, it's nice to feel this connection, especially connections right down through the ages. I think that's really
I can see Kerry down to the Thames foreshore now with a few requests in bottles. Hey, Kerry.
No. No, I don't mind beachcombing. Beachcombing's more my thing because I do that for shells and rocks and stuff like that. So it's like, so it is sort of like the edge, but not edgy enough to get dirty. It's not even like, nah, I can wash my shoes off afterwards and it's absolutely fine, kind of thing. I'm not a muddy kind of girl. I watched Nicola's videos and she's got her welly boots on and she's marching through the mud and I'm thinking, why would you want to do that? I mean, particularly you was walking through sludge in your last video with your pink wellies on and I was thinking, she's nearly up to her knees in that. That's just, oh. What if you fall over?
It's quite nice about it. I feel quite at home in the mud. My daughter gets quite horrified. She's thinking that I'm going to come and pick her up at school. So why have you always got muddy jeans on?
How old is your daughter, if you don't mind saying? Does she go with you?
No. She is absolutely anti-mudlarking. She's 15. No, it's got about the most uncoolest thing that you could imagine.
Like, come on, but mother-daughter bonding on the in the mud.
I do tease her. I tell her I'm going to do like mudlarking. Well, I used to say, well, we could have a mudlarking birthday party. Bring your friends.
Yeah, do that for her 18th. Really horrify her.
Yeah, she'll love that, I'm sure.
I'll do you a nice surprise, my darling. Leave it to me.
Bring your wellies.
Yeah. Absolutely brilliant. Now, amongst all of this, there is a theme that I'm noticing running through this, apart from the mud factor. It is that connection, it is that spirituality that you're linking in with your artistic work, to what you find, to your passion for finding the history of this. And the history is so important in so many areas of our lives. And yet one of the topics that we always found most boring in the schools. And there needs to be a movement forward to make history more exciting for people and children, to engage them. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things about mudlarking, because there's a lot of children that contact me, or their parents often contact me and say, oh, my 3-year-old loves watching your videos, or my 4-year-old is obsessed.
I'll turn my mic off. Carry on.
I think that the thing is about picking up something that you found by the river or on the beach is that it's history that you can touch. You know, you can actually see it and hold it in your hands and think, wow, this might have belonged to Henry VIII or something. So, you know, it's far more fun than learning about something in a classroom. It's just having that thing in your hand. You know, when you find a coin, it's like somebody from the past has directly handed it down to you. So it inspires children's imaginations as well as adults.
It's quite hands-on, and kids love that, don't they?
Yeah.
That's what it's all about. Is there many? What's the most common era that you find objects for?
Well, it really depends on where you go, to be honest with you. I mean, often places where I go, I'm going to find Victorian or Georgian era finds, but then there's other places that I'll go where I'll find a lot of Roman pottery. I found a beautiful Roman bowl the other day in 3 bits, and I found a Roman hairpin there as well. So, you know, it just depends where you are. But where I go predominantly, it's mostly Victorian, Georgian, sort of Edwardian.
Right.
Sorry about that with the dog. It was the postman this time of night, would you believe? I was like, go away, I'm recording a show, God damn you.
That's the first.
No.
The postman turning up.
At this time of night on a Friday. I'm like, oh my Lord. Sorry, where was we with all of this?
Richard had a question.
Sorry, Richard, carry on.
Yeah. As Paul was saying, you know, sort of children actually love it and sort of like getting hands on and stuff. It's sort of like a good way, sort of, I suppose, through Mudlarking. It is like another form of recycling, isn't it? As well, you can go and sort of like reclaim sort of things.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't quite catch all of that. What was the?
He was basically saying it was quite environmentally friendly because you're recycling a lot of things that come, you know, are coming to the surface. So you've got a lot of things that would just sort of, you know, cause problems there, and you're doing there.
That's right. So I mean, it's rubbish from the ages, but also I collect a lot of plastic. I made a very big sculpture of I like to think it's a cormorant. It looks a bit more like a pterodactyl, but it's made out of Thames plastic. And so, I try to recycle as much as possible. And, you know, there is pollution in the river, which is a shame. There's still a lot of plastic in the river. So, you know, I try as well to build an awareness of that pollution by collecting plastic and making pictures of it next to the riverbanks.
Brilliant. That's just amazing. You know, you see a lot of people do stone sculptures and stuff like that with things that they find on the foreshore. A lot of artists that play around with stones and leave shell sculptures and stuff like that. But that's brilliant that you're taking something that's horrible and bad and corrosive and something that we should be really aware of putting out into our environment, and you're taking it and making something of beauty of it.
Yeah, I try. I'm trying to. And it's a good challenge. It's a good challenge. I do find it inspiring, even though it's plastic, because it's there's just some very odd shapes. And if it can, I think people are often more influenced about things if they can see something visually, you know. And if you can create a big collage out of a load of plastic, it sort of is a bit more striking than just talking about it.
I also think you're underplaying your work, because I've seen some of your work that you put out there on Tideline Arts on Facebook. Everybody go check her out, because what you're creating is actually very beautiful. I think you're very underplaying it with what you're saying, to be fair, because I really like your artwork. I think it's absolutely beautiful. Where else can people see your artwork? Twitter, is that Tideline Arts as well?
Yeah, that's right. Anything Tideline Art, really. On Twitter, I'm at Tideline Art, and I'm on Instagram, Tideline Art. My website is tidelineart.com, and I have an Etsy site where I do sell my work, and it's also called Tideline Art, funnily enough. But at the moment, there's nothing on there. I'm busily making a new shoal of glass fish at the moment. They don't hang around very long, actually, which is good for me, I suppose. So yes, anything tide line art, and then you can see what I do, and see if it inspires you. And my YouTube channel, of course, which is Nicola White Mudlark.
Very much so. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure listening to this side of things. It's a fascinating hobby. Hobby, yeah, that's the right word for it, isn't it? I suppose hobby, job, kind of thing that you do, and it does tie into the paranormal. And if you want to know how, you need to listen just after this.
Hello, Harry Price here. If there's nothing me and my friends enjoy more here on the other side, it is to sit back and relax and listen to the Paranormal Concept Show, right here on the PAUK Radio Network. Broadcasting a plethora of interesting and informative content for all your paranormal needs. Find them across social media to keep up to date with forthcoming shows and all their other adventures. Hello, is there anybody there?
Welcome back to the Paranormal Concept Show, exclusive to the Paranormal UK Radio Network. Now, before the break, we had the lovely Nicola White, Mudlarker herself, in the studio. And whilst we were talking, we brought up a few themes that we're going to expand upon between the three of us on this one, which is basically that connection between people and objects.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's quite rife in the paranormal at the moment, isn't it?
Incredibly rife between people, and it seems to become more and more. It used to be just a haunted doll, didn't it?
Yeah, but now it's pretty much everything, isn't it?
Everything and anything, and even if. Do you think then, looking at that, Nicola finds an object and then she researches it, and she's been able to find that connection with objects. One thing I have found that isn't being put out there, I don't know if it's being done, so I can't sit and be critical about it because I don't know. But do you think that's something that's missed even, in regards to what the community is putting out there? They're just going, look at the activity we've got surrounding this object, but they're going, they may know the history of the object, but they're not putting it out there. And do you think there's a reason why they're not putting it out there?
I certainly found the way Nicola goes about it, even though she uses her finds for art and stuff like that. That, to me, it resonates with me more, because usually sort of I'm not really that sort of taken with the whole haunted sort of object sort of field out there. But it seems a very organic way to do it. It seems, you are sort of building a connection with the object as well. So, and if the object, I can actually see the object actually giving you something back, and this probably will come out with you researching it and stuff like that. I think the key's there.
Absolutely. No, I do think that when you do get an object and you do get activity with it, you can learn from that, and you need to do some research about the object, who it belonged to, and that's sort of what we should be doing as investigators anyway, to try and trace back who the object belonged to, whether or not we can, say, for example, I don't know, like a doctor's bag, for example, you can get the energy off that, and you can say, oh yeah, this is what I'm getting, it's a doctor, he committed murders and stuff like that, and then you try and research to tie it back to see if you're getting the actual spirit, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so this is a difficult one in the paranormal, because if you put that information out there for all to find, if somebody comes along and says, well, what I'm getting is this, and this, and they're spot on with what you found out, but you've put it out there, there's always then leads that doubt, doesn't there, that maybe they saw it, maybe they read about it, and maybe they're lying, maybe they're fraudulent. You know what I mean? It puts that doubt out there, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. But you just got to try and take it on face value that they didn't. I mean, otherwise, you're going to keep it secret, and then they're going to come to you and say this anyway, and you can either confirm or deny. And if you deny it, you're basically lying and telling them that they're a load of rubbish, when in actual fact they're not.
Do you think it's worth holding that information more privately then? And just having the artefacts out standalone pieces without any history about the items at all?
I think in the setting of someone like the Antique Centre research place, you got the objects. They don't specifically say that they're haunted.
No.
It's down to you to go and investigate, and what you say about a particular object should be recorded by the centre.
I think they are doing that, though, aren't they? They
Yeah.
have said before now that they are recording or noting down. I think the Friday nights that they were doing up there were geared more towards that, weren't they? To see if there were common threads and information coming through that maybe they didn't know, and then they're going to go away, research it, and come back to it. It's a balancing act, though, isn't it? How much you put out there to see whether or not it's a difficult one. I think this is a difficult one. I don't think, in regards to a paranormal investigation of an object, you should put the history out, because you can't then say they didn't read it or know.
No, that's
about
right.
it.
And this is the point of doing an experiment with that object. Say, for example, you do an investigation with that object for about a year. You learn everything you can about it, and you can tie it to the activity or the energy that you can get from it. So once you've done that, you can put that information out there, but then work on another object.
Yeah, because effectively your research has been finished on that.
Yeah, because all you're trying to do is prove that there is life after death. If you can do that and tie it all up, no loose ends or anything, then you can put that out there and say this object is active. It's got an energy to it. People have experienced it. This is the history of it. We can tie it together. It belonged to so and so, and this is what people are picking up with it. That's that object done. So you could put it in a display case. You could put the history and everything else that you've learned about it all on that display case. But then, people will go there and experience that for themselves, no different from a normal museum when they've learned everything they can from like a Roman slipper or something. But then, you'll always get new objects come in that will entice people to come and do the investigation.
Richard?
But the information that is gathered over the period of time from the said sort of an object and the way you describe it, Paul, and then you put it in a display case and actually sort of show it and say, sort of document, sort of list what has been found out and confirmed, that would only ever be of any interest to other people in the paranormal community, wouldn't it? I mean,
I don't think so. I think anyone that's interested in the paranormal as a whole would still go and see it. It's where it crosses over from a research centre to a museum.
There is a crossover point, isn't there?
Yeah, that's what I think. So once you found out everything, then you put it into like a museum category, so it gets put in as a display piece.
But you could only ever put that into a paranormal museum. I mean, if you took it...
Or something like maybe a Ripley's Believe It or Not. Or,
yes. I mean, because if I was to turn up at the British Museum with a said object and said me and my sort of group of friends have done a lot of sort of psychic work, for want of a better word, on this object, and this is the history of it and what we've gleaned from it, you'll be laughed at.
Not necessarily. I'll argue that point. Because that's not necessarily. Because if you had an artefact that would have been of interest to the British Museum in the first place, and you had not just redone the cyclical research side of it, but you'd actually done the historical research on it and had authentication on that. That's when we talk research, you've got to have it authenticated that is correct to link to that object. They may not be interested in the cyclical side, but they think if it was of interest to them as a museum, they would be interested in regards to the object and the historical interest. Remember, the British Museum's got John Dee's stuff in there, and that's a cult.
I would also like to point out that there are artefacts in the museum, British Museum, that are not on display because certain people that work there get freaked out by it. And there's no explanation to why they do. The crystal skull, that's what I'm thinking of.
And also, there has been reports of people that have worked, like security guards who have worked the Egyptian artefacts, that there's been weird and strange, wondrous happenings in regards to that as in that area as well. So I wouldn't dismiss that. I wouldn't say that perspective. I don't think they would laugh you out. I think they would actually be more interested than you think.
Okay.
Depending on the age of the item. I think actually if you took a 1970s dolly, I think they might be a bit like, I don't think so.
This is what I was sort of getting at. I mean,
only because it doesn't fit the remit of the museum.
Mm-hmm.
If you took that to the Bethnal Green Doll Museum, you might find a different reception. So you have to gauge your audience, I suppose.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you wouldn't necessarily put I don't know. You've got to pitch it to the right audience. That's exactly it, isn't it? Pitching it to the right audience. You're not going to take a high action comedy film to somebody who does indie art kind of films. You know what I mean? It's the same sort of thing. But if you've got a historical, authenticated historical research, and then you've got backed up or cyclical research that's run parallel with that, and it's interesting what's come through from that, I think that makes an incredibly interesting project for a start. But it is incredibly difficult to pin it down, to pin an object down to an actual historical timeline. When we was talking to about the Haunted Bride doll and trying to find, yes, you can find the maker, you can find where it was made, you can find how old the doll is, maker's marks and all that sort of thing. But who bought it, where it lived, how it moved on from there, how it ended up in the antique museum or wherever it ended up, or to then be sold on eBay to then end up in Lee's hands. It's very, do you see what I mean? There's a whole history there that's incredibly hard to research.
It is certainly a strange object that I've actually done some work with it. Been fortunate enough to sort of and do some work with it, and it seems not that I'm particularly sort of tuned into that, but I've sort of done a bit of dowsing work around it, and it is very sort of difficult to get anything out of it. And what I did sort of run sort of like contrary. I mean, I kept getting a male sort of presence connected with the doll, which is something that I think most people were not expecting to actually come from it, and being a doll, you think dolls, girls, being a bride doll, sort of a bride, it's sort of, there's a lot there to sort of throw you off the scent if you are actually trying to tune into something sort of more, something that is actually behind that doll. There's a lot to look at that can probably just throw you totally off the scent.
But you say that, but when you spoke to Lee and Lindsay about it, that's come up before with that doll. Yes,
it's come up about once or twice before, and I was just trying to think, and I come up with belonging to a male, and it wouldn't go much further back than 1950, which did tie in as like Lee and Lindsay said, but this was sort of just stuff that they generally sort of knew, that had been told in confidence by a top psychic or something like that.
But that makes it interesting, because if we then get a name, a male name, that then gives us a point where we can then maybe research that further back. We can go, right, okay, and then we find out that person owned that doll. That makes it even more interesting, because there's, like you say, psychological triggers wouldn't have necessarily put a male in the 1950s time owning a bride doll. Do you know what I mean? But that's the thing, isn't it? It's finding those key psychic moments which give you enough information that you can go and do some research on. And who knows what you might find of a name or a date that's linked to that location or that object. And that's the point, isn't it? That I find that actually quite exciting side of the paranormal. You don't always get it. Sometimes it's a bit more vague than that. You get mail, 1950s. All right, it could be anybody, it could be anywhere. All right, we need to narrow it down with something more specific. But those nuggets, in the same way as when you're mudlarking and you're looking up at a sea of mud and stones, and then you find that bit that you go, that's interesting.
Yeah, I suppose that's a good sort of like connection there. Like the paranormal can seem like a sea of mud and stones, but there's little gems hidden in there if you're prepared to actually look.
Yeah.
Paul?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, it's like, no, my train of thought's gone. Been derailed.
I think that this is there's a lesson to be learned, I think, from this, which is why we got Nicola on, really, was because of the overall lesson of trudging through the mud and finding a little bit of treasure. And that's no different when you're working paranormally. I mean, how many hours of footage do you sit and look through after an investigation for that one bit that might be, might not be, but might be?
Research is the key.
It all comes down to research, but it also ties into history.
Yeah.
It always comes back to those points. Researching and history. It doesn't matter what angle you come at the paranormal from, it always comes down to that. Because even if you're looking at, say, a cryptid case, for example, you want evidence of that. We're not just happy with, well, I saw a Bigfoot running through the hills and here's a really grainy image of it. You want more concrete evidence than that. Yes, that's very exciting, it's very interesting, and I'm going to go out in the area that you saw it and see if I can find any physical evidence for that. Yeah, that's physical research, as it were, on the ground. Then maybe you'll talk to a few more people, see if there's any more cases of it, if it's a one-off or it's a regular sighting. If it was a regular sighting, then that gives you an area where you go, okay, so it's been seen, 10 times in the last year in this area, so you can pin it down. And it all comes back to that. Then you'd look at folklore and history and stuff like that in regards to, okay, so is there any folklore history or, stories around this area? Is this an area that's of interest in regards to legend or something along those lines? And it all starts to tie together, and you can see how your one little personal experience branches out into actually quite a big research project.
Well, yeah, and it's surprising. They're, sort of like, if it does take you down the folklore route, you can actually sort of go and seek out sort of folklorists, and that is an academic pursuit. So that does sort of give what you're sort of like looking for, some academic sort of backing as well.
Well, that's it. I mean, you always, you always want to try and look for the first-hand evidence. And that is basically like eyewitnesses or people that have actually experienced something. So you can get all the details you can from that person. Second-hand witness or second-hand evidence is like people have written about it. Like, for example, the children of Woolpit. I've done blogs and written about them for like years, but we've actually gone to see Woolpit ourselves. We've gone to the museum that's there, and that's second-hand evidence. We managed to get a document that was a copy of the original town, although it was second-hand. Again, that was second-hand evidence because it was written by someone that was telling the story as opposed to it was actually there. Unfortunately, you can't always get the first-hand evidence, but
but it does pay, to actually visit these places, even if because a lot of people in the paranormal will get hung up to go to these places specifically to look for their sort of paranormal experience and stuff like that. But I think, as me and you have found out, Paul, when we've done all our trips, we don't generally go for like a paranormal investigation. You know, we just go to actually look at the places and sort of get a feel for the places, and sort of the Wall Pit trip is a good example, because it led us to that small museum, and we were sort of like picking up sort of like manuscripts, and facsimiles of the original manuscripts, which are quite difficult to find sort of anywhere else. But this museum was literally giving them away. So, and I know that helped a lot with your blog, didn't it?
It did, yes, very much so.
But out of that original transcript of the encounter, shall we say, you could see how the story had evolved. A lot of bits had been missed out of the original story. You know, as time had gone on, it turned into more of an urban legend. Many people have written about it and not visited and seen these facsimiles, and you know, it changes it. It made it less paranormal, less supernatural, when you actually went and looked at the baseline of it, really.
We sort of got as far back to the baseline as we could, which didn't really take that much sort of looking at, actually. There's a lot of sort of people in the paranormal that do overlook, you know, the basics. And that Wall Pit story, you strip it back, it is a very basic sort of story, and it is a believable story, but it's what's been added onto it over the years which makes it more fanciful.
I think in the blog I was sort of taking it from the angle, like a logical angle, as opposed to just two children that were green. You know, we looked at all sorts of things. You know, we come up with a couple of theories that, like one, at the time, they didn't actually have a word for blue. Instead, they called it a shade of green.
That's right.
Were they saying that the children were blue because they've been out in the forest for a long time, and they were actually cold because your skin goes a shade of blue? You know, so you know that could have been lost in interpretation, or you know, when someone describes someone that's very innocent, they're green behind the ears. You know, that's a term that we sometimes
naive, young, innocent. You're green. You know, and
so
that is my go-to sort of option on the Green Children of Wall Pit, and the way it's written, they just grabbed. It's been sort of like mistaken that when the person wrote the word green, and that's been taken literally. And something as small as that, a small detail like that, and you know,
and you know, there are little facts that there is in the original story that do tie into the local area. Because the children name somewhere, and I mean I don't know roughly how old these children were, but they were probably illiterate at the time. So where, you know, when they were describing where they came from, I think they said like St Michael's Mount or something like that. There is actually somewhere not far from the village that's called Michael's, I don't know, Michael's something. So, you know, could it be that they were from there, they got lost in the woods, they were a bit cold, Wall Pit found them?
Well,
you know, so it's just interpretation, and I think sometimes that gets lost down the line. So it is quite good to strip all that back.
Yeah, plus then, you have to look back at the sort of area at the time, that part of East Anglia, there was a lot of Dutch, Flemish, you know, huge populations over here to do with the wool trade and stuff like that. So, you know, so different languages around sort of that part of the country were very common back in the Middle Ages, and we tend to look at it now as something quite modern to sort of come across someone that speaks a different language, you know, but back in the Middle Ages it was extremely common.
Yeah, but we sort of come to those conclusions when we actually visited. We went into the museum, we found all like the old maps.
Yeah.
You know, so we had access to all the like second-hand information, and you know, we could come up with like maybe it was just interpretation down the years, and we actually spoke to the historian that was in the museum as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's always good to do the research and get out and about as opposed to just online.
Oh, totally. I mean, when you think about it, there are a lot of trades out there that have got nothing to do with the paranormal, but actually tie so much into the paranormal. Think of archaeology.
Yeah.
Folklorists. I know that is paranormal umbrella-y, but when you look at some of the artefacts that have come out, that has sort of come from that, because you look at the witches' bottles and the mummified cats that have been found in walls and things like that, and poppets and charms and all those kind of things. That's come from a archaeological folklore tie-in together.
Yeah.
Why is there a mummified cat in the hearth of this 18th century cottage or 16th century cottage? Well, actually, the folklorist can answer, the Witchcraft Museum can answer that for you. And, so there are people in different specialities which aren't really anything to do with the paranormal investigation world that actually tie in very well with this sort of thing. Historians. Let's talk history. Every object will have a history. Whether or not you can find it is a case in point, depending on the object. But history becomes incredibly important. How many times do we talk about a topic and then end up knee-deep in history, trying to understand it?
About 95% of the time.
It always leads back to that, doesn't it?
It is a crucial factor. I mean, if you sort of want to take your sort of paranormal research sort of seriously, you can't go much wrong to have a good serious grounding in history as well. I mean, I would go along with that. I mean,
because you might see something. I mean, I was out for a walk with one person. I can't remember who it was now. Funny enough. Can't remember his name. Anyway, we'd gone out for a walk, and he knew about battles, and he was going, the lay of the land here, the higher ground, it's all to do with higher ground and lower ground, and to do a good battle, you'd need this positioning, and look, if you look over there, and because we was able to look out where we were, it was quite high, so we was able to see the vista that was leading in front of us, and he was talking about this, and I was thinking, it's just pretty hills. Oh, look at the pretty tree. Do you know what I mean? But he was seeing it in a completely different way, from a military perspective as much as anything else. And that's, logically, if you go to a battlefield and you know the history, it's actually over a huge space, much bigger than just... See, in your head, you've got a farmer's field, quite frankly. And that's not the case. It's normally over a whole horizon of fields. Do you know what I mean? It's a big area, and then when you stand there at a vantage point and you can look, and you've got someone talking you through the history, you can almost see the battle come alive before your eyes. They came round the brow of the hill, or they came round the side of the hill, and then they attacked from the flank, and then those were marching thing. But look, you've got that river, that would have been boggy and marshy, and I'm sitting there thinking, what? But for that person, that's military history of a battle that he was really interested in. Yeah. And I was sitting there looking at it from a, isn't it pretty nature-wise kind of perspective. Yeah. And it was a completely different perspective looking at that from a completely different angle. Yet if you was doing, say, a paranormal investigation in regards to a battlefield, Gettysburg or Bosworth Hill or all the others that are out there, that historical accuracy in regards to location becomes relevant, which you wouldn't do on a piece of paper.
Well, yeah, as me and Paul were saying, get out there and have a look. I mean, not necessarily sort of take all your equipment and all your paraphernalia with you, just actually going out there to have a look and understand as well.
Absolutely. This is how they concluded that the Battle of Hastings wasn't actually where the abbey is, because they had archaeologists looking at the land, and they're like, well, it doesn't make sense having the battle there when they've got all this coverage and the hills, and they look at the lay of the land.
Well, yeah,
and they've got like one of three locations. I think the actual battle took place. But there was an episode of, I think, Time Team with Tony Robinson, and they'd done an investigation into where they think the battle was, and they actually were digging up all sorts of coins and weapons and all sorts of stuff. And they were like, "This is where what I believe it is."
Yeah,
and literally just across the road from the Abbey.
But I actually disagree with again. I'm sorry, Richard. I'm going to have to disagree with you again. I think if you're going to look at doing, I know I've been very, very disagreeing with him today. I'm sorry, Richard. I do actually disagree with him again because I think if you was to do an investigation, to know the actual layout of how the battle unfolded would be very relevant in regards to paranormal investigating.
Well, yeah.
If you're on a, say, for example, I'm not saying we would, but for an example, if you was on a World War II battlefield, it would be more interesting to know where the English, American, Canadians, all the rest of them were, and the Germans. You might be talking to a spirit who's German. It'd be interesting to then converse in German if you was able to. Do you know what I mean? Depending on if you was trying to do that, if you was trying to paranormal investigate, so history comes into it. History comes out of archaeology, like Paul has just said.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We know various things because they've dug stuff up and gone, okay, let's research all the old papyruses or whatever it is that they research to find out various pieces of information regarding that area of history. And all of a sudden, you've got a lot more in-depth view of your investigation. So whatever comes out in that investigation, you're not just looking for the Black Monk of Pontefract, for example. You could be looking for something completely different. And if it's coming up, you can then relate and move more fluidity through your investigation with what, in response to what's coming out, rather than being so fixated on the one historical famous haunting.
Well, yeah.
You could be a lot more fluid. You could focus your investigation in bigger locations in a much more suitable way in regards to, the area you're investigating, if you know a bit of the history.
I mean, sometimes, though, a lot of investigators sort of take it at face value and they do bark up the wrong tree. Take, for example, Kelvin Hatch nuclear bunker. There's a lot of people that believe that it's a military installation. And when they go there, they claim that they see spirits of army soldiers.
Yeah, sort of military personnel.
It wasn't a military operation. There was no military there whatsoever because it was a government MOD location.
It was a civil defence. And it was a local government and stuff like that.
Wasn't it? Home Office.
Yeah, it's a civil defence bunker, not a military bunker.
Yeah.
And there is a difference, a big difference.
Exactly, but you'll still get teams go in there. I mean, I'm not saying all of them. There is the odd few that I've had the unfortunate experience to meet with. But, yeah, they believe it's a military installation, and I'm like, really?
Yeah, because when I went there,
but then does that influence your? When you go to somewhere like that, generally there's a fact sheet or historical information around the building.
Yeah.
So that information is there. Whether or not you choose to take it, that's up to you personally, isn't it?
So this goes back to the evidence that you're looking at, because there is a lot of stuff in there that is first-hand evidence of what that place is and was used for. So that you can learn a lot from there.
Yeah, and you don't have to dig that deep. I mean, there is a
they've done the digging for you.
Yeah, true. But there is a few sort of areas in there which they have sort of. I can understand why people would think it's a military installation. There is a few sort of bits and pieces in there which can probably suggest that it was. But the general consensus is, and it is known, it was not a military installation. So.
But do you think then that people's understanding influences then what they get?
Yeah. Well, yeah, you talk nuclear bunker and what do you think of? Nuclear war, military. I mean, the two go hand in hand. But as with Kelvin Hatch, this is a civil bunker for civilians or government officials.
But if there was no information, with all due respect, if there was no information regarding it out there or given to you when you go there, because there's fact sheets there, where you go down to the room And then there's that table laid out that they would push planes across or boats across.
Well, yeah, there's that.
You know, it is typical psychological warfare cues.
Yes, and that's what I was referring to there. That sort of, there's a plotting table in there. That's just been added, you know, and there's a lot of that they replay the videos of the air raid sirens going and stuff like that. You know, they've got a lot of audio going in and in there. So
it leads you down the wrong path.
But
and I think that's a psychological experiment all on its own.
But my sort of investigation or digging to find out exactly what that bunker was used for, when I turned up with Paul, I asked the owner straight out. I said, "And what was the bunker used for?" And he said, "And it was a civil defence bunker." And you know, that didn't take a lot of digging to get that. It was just asking someone.
No, but you know that. You know the difference. If someone said, the only word I heard, in all honesty, defence.
Yeah.
There's a complete... I know that there's a
true.
difference, but the majority of people would go secret nuclear bunker, defence, the way it's set out, we're getting off the topic a little bit here, but the psychological triggers are all giving you that. So then the manifestations that are coming through come through in that way. So then we go back to, are they is something is in there? Is it manifesting in the way you would expect it to be? Or are we manifesting what we expect to see?
Yeah. This goes down a whole new sort of avenue. And I'm not denying that the people that are having the experiences there of, say, military personnel are actually having those experiences. I think it's the mechanisms. There's a lot more to it. And we've discussed this before, haven't we? And we've sort of got our own sort of ideas about it. But so that's a whole nother show, isn't it?
Oh, it's a totally different show, because we're talking about the connection between objects and people, you know, and how you go down that rabbit hole of knowledge when you're researching something, whether it be, you know, okay, we've gone down the location route, we've gone down a folklore story route, we've gone down different routes to get to that point of, it's not always going to be what you expect it to be. So like, say, like going back to the doll, you expect a little girl to be playing with a doll, you know, a little bride doll. And that's not the information psychically that's coming out from that doll. So we then go down the academic route and research that where we can. But where there's so many crossovers with so many different areas, not under the paranormal banner, and we're not experts in anything, in all honesty. You might have a good knowledge in certain areas, but none of us are experts in anything. I've said this before, I've got a huge interest in psychology. Anyone like an ice cream?
Oh, yeah. Him again.
Honestly. Well, we did it at this time thinking it would be a quiet moment, but clearly not. And but I'm not a psychologist. There's no way I would even think about classing myself as a paranormal psychologist. Do you know what I mean? There's no way I would do that. No way then I would think that somebody who's gone into the paranormal in regards to maybe a police forensic would say that they're, you know, from that angle, as an interest, that's the bit that interests them. Unless you've actually done that job, you can't say that you can approach it from that way. You've got a basic knowledge of that, and you can research from that angle, but you can't say that you're an expert. So you need to reach out beyond the paranormal sometimes,
of course you do,
to get the answers that you need, right?
And you shouldn't be shy in doing so, or admitting you have to do so. I mean, that is what a field researcher should be doing. Period. You know, you're there. You're just at a location. You're going around, sort of just gathering an intel. You take it away, sort of look at it, and think, right, this bit of intel, whatever it is, someone from a certain profession will know about that, or I've got a diagram of the electricity layout, you know, I'll send that to an electrician and let them have a look at it, and that's how you do it.
Exactly. So it's not as easy as that. So let's lead on to, personally, when I go on to a paranormal investigation, ghost hunt, whatever you want to call it, ghost investigation, however you want to call it, I've said this hundreds of times before, well, I go in spiritually. I don't want to know about the history. Certain things I can sit here and say I kind of know anyway because I've got a good general knowledge. I've done a lot of research in the background, done plenty of podcasts on lots of different topics. Even if I don't go out in the field, I've got kind of like in the storage brain of my mind tidbits of information that I can't help.
Yeah.
But generally, if I was going to go to a brand spanking new location that I've not done before, I would not like to do the historical research before I went. I'd like to go as blind as I could into that location, because then I know my level of knowledge on that. Whereas if I'd researched it heavily and gone into it, whatever I get, I'd be doubting myself.
But then that's where you're investigating, because you're then taking your information and then you're tying it up with history yourself.
Afterwards.
But if you're working as a team, you can have someone do the research. As long as they keep it to themselves, you can still do your bit and then get your heads together afterwards.
That's actually, that's actually a part of the investigation I used to love, the aftermath.
Yeah.
We'd go to a McDonald's or somewhere. Other fast food chains are available. I would just like to point that out. We'd hole up after the investigation to feast and drink and whatever, and just, talk about what had gone on whilst we were investigating. And then the guy who'd done the research, usually Mark Manley, funny enough, when I was early investigating, he would do the research side of things, and he'd be like, when you were saying this about this, I was going, oh my God, I can't believe that she's pulled that out, or another member of the team had said that, because I knew that, but you didn't know that.
Yeah.
Because he'd done the research before we'd gone. But then there's another concept on here about telepathic interaction. Could it be possible that we're not reading the location or the object or whatever it be that we were doing at the time, but we was actually picking up the information from the other person who'd done that research? So
That would be
maybe
the benefit of doing the work yourself.
Or maybe we should do it all afterwards from the information that comes out from the investigation.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's
interesting.
Interesting concept. You can twist it around and turn it around, can't you? And there are pros and cons to both approaches.
There is, and I like to know as much as I can about a place before I go. Not that I sort of go to many places to investigate per se. I just enjoy going to historic locations, and I generally do try and find out before I go, but that's just me. That's just the way I am. I sort of, I've sort of been interested in the paranormal now for quite a few years, and my own sort of view on it is whatever I sort of can get out of it and stuff, this is never going to be proven. I hate to disappoint anyone, but that is purely my opinion. This is never going to be proven. So to me, actually going out and doing research and looking up and knowing as much about a location and before I go is for me, fair game.
Paul?
Yeah, no, I can understand that as well.
But where do you come from in regards
when
to
when I do investigations, 9 times out of 10 I'm the one that researches it anyway, because I put history packs together, but I don't tell anybody anything, and I normally print out history on a sheet of paper and stick it in an envelope and give it out, because I do public events, you see, so I'll give out the sheets of paper to everybody at the end of the event so that they can see that the activity that they may have experienced in the event can tie into what the actual history of the building is. So I'll give people a taste of that as well.
It's very difficult to. There's no right or wrong way. None of us are sitting here saying there's a right way or wrong way of doing it. But it does bring interesting concepts to the table, and there have been studies done in regards to, objects that have come up with some very interesting findings. I don't want to say conclusions, because that sounds as if it's a definitive conclusion, but some interesting concepts that have come off the back of work done with objects, you know, particularly from my perspective, crystals and minerals and fossils was done in regards to that. And people were, you know, the study was done by William Denton. It's part of the SPR archives, and people that weren't particularly classed as psychic was coming out with information without knowing what they were holding through, you know, it was wrapped up, so they didn't know what they were holding, and was able to come out with some relevant information regarding the object that they were holding. You can't explain it. There's got to be something going on.
Yeah, what it is sort of,
again, what it is, who knows?
I think the honest answer is we don't know. That is the only sort of answer we can actually come to. I mean, it's good to have the ideas and the sort of speculation behind it, because that's what all drives us and keeps us going. But I suppose the honest answer is we don't actually know.
But we can't discount.
No, you're right.
But there is an awful lot of scepticism in regards to haunted objects.
Yes, it's one of these things. You know, it seemed to have come out of nowhere, sort of. Well, sort of not nowhere, but it sort of peaked really quickly, didn't it? I mean, throughout the years, I've often seen sort of psychics working with objects. I mean, that is sort of quite an old practice, but now it really has been brought into the mainstream sort of paranormal, and everyone seems to be sort of looking at objects now and working with them.
But if you go with the theory that everything holds energy, then everything and anything could hold energy. It doesn't. It's not going to be. Yeah. It's not going to be one odd object. It'll be, you know, to some level or other. Maybe the connection of an object with one thing would be more than maybe something with another. But as Nicola was saying, she feels like everything's got a story to tell, and if it wants to be found, it will. If, you know, when she was recounting some of her stories about, you know, and she's not psychic, she's not paranormal, she's not anything to do with it, which is why it was so interesting to bring her onto the show, to hear from that perspective. It's almost like the things she's finding sometimes need their story to be found, their story to be told, that she's able to connect people back to that object or that story. And that's what fascinates me about it. Because that's somebody who's not, you know, she's artistic, but she's not out there in a paranormal perspective. She's out there doing her thing for her love of what she does for her hobby. Yeah. But she's having these things happen and finding things that have phenomenal stories behind them. You know, and that in itself, to me, is interesting. You know, take the paranormal, you know, palaver out of it, the fashionista of things in the paranormal. There is still something going on outside the paranormal fields. You've got somebody not connected to the paranormal relating almost spiritual connection stories, you know, without me actually having to dig that much. Even she said in her own words, if they want to be found, if it's their time to be found, they will be shown. Yeah. You know, they'll come to light. She said it herself. I didn't dig for that. She said it herself, that they all it feels like they have a story to tell. That's beyond. I found this pretty object in a bit of mud. You know, can you see where I'm going with this? I think there is something to this. I think there is. You do have to do the digging. You do have to back it up with the history. You do have to look beyond the initial aesthetics of anything, whether it be a location, whether it be an object, and do your digging. But I do think it's relevant in regards to it. I find this side of it absolutely fascinating. Take the hysterics out of it, I suppose, and focus on the story, and then you've got something that's interesting, something you can't explain, something that actually makes it paranormal.
And I think after this show, me and Richard are going mudlarking.
Well, yeah, hopefully.
Yeah.
I kind of wanted to. While she was talking about opening it up, for Mudlarkers, not for the paranormal. And I was thinking, the paranormal would love that. They would love that. All those objects that have got all that history and, traceable to a degree, some of the pipes and that is, they can pin down the era, they can pin down the maker, they can pin down certain sectors. I mean, one of the things that she had on one of her videos was a Freemasons pipe.
Yeah.
All right.
She found it because it had the mark of the Freemasons on it. So that's, quite a small, relatively, back in the day, relatively small group in regards to that era.
Yeah.
And it brings it to life. Is it just that then? Is it just the historic information? Just gives it a life. It was an object that was used by a human at some point in history. And that's phenomenal to me. That blows my mind.
It makes it more real, doesn't it? And
yeah.
It almost gives you a link back to that period.
Yeah.
Yeah, I certainly like the way sort of, the mudlarking and the way Nicola's approach, and as I said at the start of this sort of piece, that to me that is sort of, if any objects are going to sort of like contain any sort of meaningful story or sort of energy or something, it is the ones you find by chance or go out looking for on the Thames foreshore, and those objects. I'm quite drawn to that aspect, and I like the idea of that. As for sort of like the more sort of commercially available sort of centres and sort of stuff, I am not. They're interesting, and don't get me wrong, and I've been to them, and I do enjoy and going to them. But sort of listening to Nicola and what she does, it certainly has sort of piqued my interest again.
It piques your interest because, you had an interest in metal detecting before.
Yes.
It's something you've dabbled with before.
Mm-hmm.
When she was talking about finding that Roman coin, at some point in history, a Roman has walked that area and dropped a coin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That hasn't moved, apart from ecological movement or environmental movement.
Yeah, it goes up and down. Yeah, it goes up and down.
Other than that, it's not gone miles, has it? Put it that way. That has been there since that Roman walked that point.
Mm-hmm.
How much is under our feet that we don't know? How much is on our foreshores that the history that's on our foreshores? That fascinates me. I would not going to go mudlarking. I will put that out there, everybody. But I would go with a different eye, probably now when I beach comb.
Beach combing, yeah, it's all related, and beach combing is sort of like the more sort of placid form of it's mudlarking without the mud, and I think you'd like that, Kerry.
I don't mind a bit of beach combing, so I've done that quite a lot in my own way because of looking for hagstones or shells that I was after for a grid. I've gridded on the beach, on the on the edge, as it were. And stuff like that. For me, that's very, connected to the element, to elements and elementals and stuff like that. So, but take my spiritual side of it out, there is a link with history there too. Wherever you go, whatever land you walk on, there's a link to history. And that connection that humans have to their environment and their location is incredibly important. And you don't think it's related to the paranormal. We know so much information from unparanormal areas that have done that kind of work and that interest and that side of it. It just brings a different concept into it, a different way of looking at it.
Yeah.
And whether or not you do research the history before you go on an investigation or not, that brings up interesting concepts in regards to, is it telepathic interaction? Is it things holding energy that we can pick up on so that there's something science can't explain, but it's there. Is it, I don't know, it just brings up so much information, that in itself, that one concept brings up so many different areas and so pulls together so many different concepts, doesn't it?
It does, and we'll let you know exactly what we feel when we go out mudlarking.
Well, yeah, you two can, and when Richard and you guys go to Grain Fault, and spend some time there, you can relay your tales to me all the time.
Yeah.
No, you can be there as well.
Yeah, you can come along as well.
I don't think so. I don't think so. She says. So, on that note, that we've kind of wrapped up the show on that one, right?
Yeah, I think
it's a good show. So. Enjoyed that.
But it does bring up a hell of a lot of interesting concepts to mind, and you have to think beyond just going out and seeing if you can capture a ghost on camera. On that note, we bid you a very farewell on this time. Say goodbye, guys.
Goodbye, guys.